The spill that started it all. Sophie Winters balanced the heavy tray with practiced ease, weaving through the maze of white-clothed tables at Lumière, the most upscale restaurant in the city. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow across polished surfaces, and the soft murmur of conversation blended with the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Her feet ached in the mandatory black heels, but she'd mastered the art of hiding discomfort behind a pleasant smile. "Table 12's appetizers are up," called Marco from the kitchen. "Got it," Sophie replied, mentally adding it to her growing list of tasks. She served the martinis to a middle-aged couple celebrating their anniversary, offering her warmest congratulations, while her mind drifted momentarily to the economics textbook waiting in her locker. The midterm was in 3 days, and she'd barely found time to study between shifts and caring for Lily. "Sophie!" Diane, the hostess, waved her over with an urgent expression. "Mr. Reynolds wants another bottle of the Bordeaux at table 7, and I just seated a VIP at 23. Gregory wants you to handle it personally." Sophie glanced at the round table in the corner, where Gregory, the restaurant manager, was fawning over a group of suited men. One in particular commanded attention, his expensive charcoal suit perfectly tailored to broad shoulders, his dark hair precisely styled. Even from across the room, Sophie could sense the authority he carried. "Who is he?" she whispered to Diane. "Ethan Stone," Diane whispered back, eyes wide. "The Ethan Stone, billionaire tech investor, own half the city's skyline. Gregory nearly had a stroke when he walked in." Sophie nodded, swallowing hard. The wealthy patrons tipped well, but they expected perfection, and she was already running on fumes after a double shift. "I'll get the Bordeaux first," she said, hurrying toward the wine cellar. 10 minutes later, Sophie approached table 23 with careful steps, balancing a tray of top-shelf drinks. She'd already overheard Gregory explaining that Mr. Stone's usual table had been given to another party due to a reservation mix-up, and his displeasure was evident in the tight set of his jaw. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sophie said, summoning her most professional tone. "Welcome to Lumière." She began setting down the drinks, noting the array of documents spread across the table. Contracts with bold letterhead, graphs with rising lines, and what appeared to be architectural blueprints. The men barely acknowledged her presence, deep in conversation about acquisition targets and market values. Ethan Stone sat with his back straight, fingers steepled before him. Up close, his features were even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with 5 o'clock shadow, and piercing gray eyes currently fixed on a balding man who was nervously describing quarterly projections. "These numbers don't match what you promised last month, Harold," Stone said, his voice low but cutting. "I don't appreciate having my time wasted." Sophie carefully placed his whiskey, neat top shelf, beside him, catching a whiff of expensive cologne that somehow smelled like money and power. When he didn't break from his conversation to thank her, she simply moved on, placing the remaining drinks without interrupting. She was nearly finished when disaster struck. A busboy rushing past knocked against her elbow. Sophie felt the sickening shift of weight on her tray, her momentary loss of balance, and then horror in slow motion. The remaining drinks tipped, amber liquid arcing through the air, before splashing across Ethan Stone's immaculate suit, white shirt, and the important papers spread before him. The table fell silent. Nearby conversation stuttered to a halt. "I'm so sorry," Sophie gasped, grabbing napkins and desperately trying to blot the spreading stain on his jacket. "It was an accident." Ethan Stone rose to his full height, towering over her. His expression transformed from shock to cold fury in the space of a heartbeat. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" The quiet in his voice was more terrifying than if he'd shouted. Ice dripped from every syllable as whiskey dripped from his ruined documents. "Sir, I'm truly sorry. I'll get more napkins." Sophie reached for the soaked papers, trying to save them. "Don't touch those." He caught her wrist, not roughly, but with unmistakable firmness. "Their contract's worth more than you'll make in a decade." Heat rushed to Sophie's cheeks. Mortification battled with a flicker of indignation at his tone. "It was an accident," she repeated, meeting his gaze despite her better judgment. "I was bumped." "Incompetence isn't excused by excuses," he replied coldly, releasing her wrist. "This suit costs more than your monthly rent, and these contracts were supposed to be signed tonight." Sophie's hands trembled slightly as she continued to mop up the spill, acutely aware of every eye in the restaurant on her. Gregory materialized beside her, his face ashen. "Mr. Stone, please accept our deepest apologies. Your meal is completely complimentary, of course, and will cover all dry cleaning expenses." Ethan Stone wasn't listening. He was studying Sophie with narrowed eyes, taking in her flushed face and the determined set of her jaw. When she looked up again, something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but a flicker of something beyond anger. "I don't have time for this," he finally said, gathering his ruined papers. "The deal will have to be postponed." "Sophie," Gregory hissed through gritted teeth, "go get fresh towels and then wait in my office." She nodded, backing away from the disaster scene. But as she turned, something made her pause and look back. "Again, I'm very sorry about your suit, Mr. Stone, and your papers." Ethan Stone stared at her, and for a moment, just a fleeting moment, Sophie felt an unexpected current pass between them, like static electricity arcing across the space. His eyes weren't just cold, they were assessing, curious even, beneath the frustration. "Your apology doesn't fix anything," he said finally, but there was something different in his tone. His gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary. Sophie straightened her shoulders, her own spark of pride flaring despite the circumstances. "No, but it's sincere all the same." She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back, unaware that this catastrophic meeting had just set both their lives on a collision course neither could have anticipated. As she pushed through the kitchen doors, Sophie pressed her cool hands against her burning cheeks. The image of those intense gray eyes stayed with her, along with the peculiar sensation that despite the disaster, something significant had just happened. And in the dining room, as Ethan Stone dabbed whiskey from his ruined sleeve, he found himself unusually distracted from the business at hand, his thoughts lingering on the waitress who'd had the courage to meet his gaze when most would have crumbled. "Sit down, Sophie." Gregory's voice cut through the tense silence of his cramped office. The warm ambience of the dining room didn't extend here, just harsh fluorescent lighting that emphasized the manager's flushed face and thinning hair. Sophie perched on the edge of a chair, still smelling the sweet, sharp scent of spilled whiskey on her uniform. "Do you have any idea who Ethan Stone is?" Gregory didn't wait for her answer. "One of the wealthiest men in the city, owns half the buildings downtown, has connections to every power player worth knowing." Each statement landed like a hammer. "And you dumped drinks all over him and his multi-million-dollar contracts." Sophie's stomach twisted. "It was an accident, Gregory. Marco bumped into me." "I don't care if the Queen of England bumped into you," he snapped. "You're the one holding the tray. You're responsible." She pressed her lips together, swallowing the defense that rose to her throat. Jobs at high-end restaurants were scarce, and the tips at Lumière helped cover Lily's after-school care. Gregory slid a hand down his face. "Mr. Stone is a regular. Do you know how long it took to get him to choose Lumière as his preferred venue for business dinners?" He shook his head. "I can't have staff who create disasters with our VIPs." The blow she'd been bracing for finally landed. "I'm letting you go, Sophie. You'll get this week's pay, but that's it." Though expected, the words still stole her breath. "Gregory, please, I need this job. I have a daughter. And I have a business to run." His voice softened fractionally. "Look, you're a good server when you're not drenching billionaires. I'll give you a reference for somewhere else, but not another fine dining establishment. Try the diner on 10th. They're always hiring." 10 minutes later, Sophie pushed through Lumiere's back exit, into the chilly evening air, carrying her few belongings in a canvas tote. Diane caught her at the door. "What happened in there?" she asked, hugging her order pad to her chest. "I'm fired," Sophie said, the reality settling heavier with the admission. "That's not fair. Marco should have been watching where he was going." Sophie attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's done. And honestly, I couldn't face Mr. Stone if he ever returned." She hugged Diane quickly. "I've got to catch the 9:15 bus." As she hurried toward the bus stop, Sophie glimpsed the sleek black town car idling at the restaurant's entrance. Ethan Stone emerged from Lumière, his ruined suit jacket draped over one arm, his expression severe as he spoke into his phone. Their eyes met briefly across the distance. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not remorse, certainly, but perhaps a moment of recognition. Sophie turned away first, quickening her pace. The bus lurched through evening traffic, its fluorescent lights making everyone look sickly and tired. Sophie leaned her forehead against the cool window, mentally calculating figures that refused to add up favorably. Rent, $700. Utilities, $180. Groceries, at least $400. Lily's after-school program, $350. Her night class tuition payment, $800 due in 2 weeks. And now, no income. She had about $2,000 in savings, emergency money that would barely stretch a month if she was exceptionally careful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Abernathy, her elderly neighbor who watched Lily on late nights. "She's fed and did homework. Fell asleep waiting for you. Such a good girl." Sophie texted back her thanks, adding that she was almost home. At least Lily was asleep, giving Sophie a little time to compose herself before facing her daughter's perceptive gaze. As the bus trundled through downtown, they passed the gleaming stone Enterprises Tower, its upper floors still illuminated despite the late hour. Sophie felt a flare of resentment. One ruined suit probably cost Ethan Stone less than what she made in 2 weeks, yet that accident had cost her entire livelihood. And yet, there had been that peculiar moment when their eyes met, when something passed between them that wasn't just anger or embarrassment. Sophie shook the thought away. It didn't matter now. Her apartment building sat wedged between a laundromat and a convenience store, its brick facade worn but clean. Sophie trudged up 3 flights of stairs, her legs heavy with exhaustion. When she unlocked the door, Mrs. Abernathy looked up from her knitting, glasses perched on her nose. "There you are, dear. Everything all right. You're home early." Sophie set down her bag, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just a change in the schedule. Thank you so much for staying late." After paying the kind woman, each dollar a twinge in Sophie's chest, she tiptoed to check on Lily. Her 6-year-old daughter lay curled beneath her faded princess comforter, brown curls spilling across her pillow, one small hand clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit. The sight, as always, squeezed Sophie's heart with fierce love. This was why she worked double shifts, why she took night classes despite exhaustion, why she would figure this out, somehow. She was padding back toward the kitchen when a small voice called, "Mommy!" Sophie returned to find Lily sitting up, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Hey, sweetheart. Sorry I woke you." "'S okay." Lily's arms reached up, and Sophie sank onto the bed, gathering her daughter close. "Did you bring fancy restaurant food?" Sophie smiled against Lily's hair. "Not tonight, Bug, but I'm home early, so we can have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow." "With chocolate chips?" Lily's voice brightened. "We'll see if we have any left." Sophie gently tucked her back in. "Now, back to sleep. You have school tomorrow." Once Lily's breathing had deepened again, Sophie allowed her smile to fall. She changed out of her uniform, perhaps for the last time, and settled at the tiny kitchen table with her laptop and a stack of bills. The glow of the screen illuminated her determined expression as she updated her resume and began searching job listings. Waitressing positions were plentiful, but rarely paid as well as Lumière. She considered dropping her economics course. The tuition refund would help, but it would delay her degree even further. After an hour of searching and calculating, Sophie rubbed her tired eyes. As she gathered her papers, something fell from her bag. A business card, thick cream-colored stock, with embossed lettering. Ethan Stone, CEO, Stone Enterprises. She must have swept it up with the scattered items from the table. Sophie stared at it for a long moment, tracing a finger over the raised letters. For a wild second, she considered calling the number, demanding he make this right. Ridiculous, of course. She moved to toss it in the trash, then hesitated. Instead, she tucked it into her desk drawer. Perhaps there was another way to address this situation. Something more dignified than late-night phone calls or letting it go entirely. Tomorrow, she'd figure it out. Sophie shut off the light and fell into bed, too exhausted even for dreams. Across town, in a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a glass and steel tower, Ethan Stone poured himself another whiskey. The drink's amber color reminded him unpleasantly of the earlier disaster. But he took a swallow anyway, savoring the burn. He'd changed into casual clothes, though what Ethan Stone considered casual would still cost more than most people's formal wear. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below him, a tapestry of lights against the darkness. His domain, in many ways. His phone buzzed again. The third call from Harold about the postponed contract signing. Ethan let it go to voicemail. The deal would happen regardless. His time was the most valuable commodity in any negotiation. What irritated him more was his own distraction. He found himself replaying the incident at the restaurant, not with anger, but with puzzling interest. The waitress, Sophie, he'd heard the manager call her, had apologized with genuine remorse. Yet when he'd dismissed her apology, something had flashed in her eyes. Not fear or submission, which he was accustomed to seeing when he was displeased, but a flicker of defiance. No, but it's sincere all the same. Her words echoed in his mind. He'd encountered thousands of employees, business associates, and service workers in his career. Most blurred together in his memory. Why was this woman's face so clear in his thoughts? Perhaps it was the glimpse of the textbook he'd spotted in her bag, Economics 301, the same course he'd taken 15 years ago on his way to his MBA, or the faint shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of more than just a long shift, or the graceful way she'd handled the other tables before disaster struck. Ethan frowned and set down his glass with more force than necessary. What did it matter? She was just a waitress who'd been clumsy at the wrong moment. Yet, as he returned to his laptop, he found himself opening a browser and typing Lumière restaurant staff into the search bar. He stopped himself, closing the window with a sharp click. Ridiculous, he muttered, turning instead to the quarterly reports that demanded his attention. But even as he worked late into the night, occasionally his mind would drift to a pair of determined eyes and the surprising spark he'd felt when they'd challenged him. It was a novel sensation for a man accustomed to deference, and despite his best efforts, not entirely unwelcome. Unlikely crossroads. Sophie checked her reflection in the glossy marble wall of the Stone Enterprises lobby. Her navy skirt suit, purchased second-hand for job interviews, fit well enough, and she'd twisted her hair into a neat bun. Professional, dignified. Not at all like someone who'd been fired yesterday for drenching the CEO in expensive whiskey. The soaring lobby intimidated with its sleek minimalism, all glass, steel, and pale stone rising 50 stories into the clouds. Well-dressed professionals streamed past, radiating purpose and confidence. A massive brushed steel logo dominated the reception wall, a stylized S that somehow managed to look both artistic and imposing. Just like its owner. Sophie clutched her small purse, inside which lay an envelope containing nearly all her cash savings, $300 that she could scarcely afford to part with, but felt obligated to offer for the ruined suit. She'd spent the morning researching Ethan Stone, learning about his rise from brilliant MBA graduate to tech investor and real estate magnate. His reputation was formidable, ruthlessly efficient, demanding, and unapologetically ambitious. "Can I help you?" A perfectly groomed receptionist arched a sculpted eyebrow. "I'd like to see Mr. Stone, please." Sophie straightened her shoulders, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. The receptionist's smile turned polite but dismissive. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but Mr. Stone's schedule is booked solid for the next 3 weeks. If you'd like to leave your card, I can have his assistant contact you about future availability." Sophie bit her lip. "It's regarding an incident last night at Lumière restaurant. I'm Sophie Winters. He'll remember." Recognition flickered in the receptionist's eyes. Clearly, office gossip traveled fast. "One moment, please." While the woman made a discreet call, Sophie shifted uncomfortably. This had seemed like a good idea at 3 a.m. Coming here, apologizing properly, offering compensation. But now it felt foolish. Ethan Stone wouldn't care about her apology or her money. Men like him operated in a different reality. "Miss Winters?" Sophie turned to find a polished woman in her 40s, regarding her with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Vivian Mercer, Mr. Stone's executive assistant. I understand you wish to see him?" "Yes, but I realize he's busy." "Actually, he has an unexpected opening. His 9:30 canceled." Vivian's expression remained neutral, but Sophie sensed she was being evaluated. "Follow me, please." They entered a private elevator that whooshed up to the top floor with barely a whisper of sound. Sophie's stomach fluttered, partly from the rapid ascent and partly from nerves. Vivian led her through a sleek corridor to an impressive set of double doors. "Wait here," she instructed, disappearing inside. Sophie inhaled deeply, rehearsing her speech one last time. The door opened again, and Vivian gestured her forward. "Mr. Stone will see you now." Ethan Stone stood at the far end of his corner office, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city sprawling below. Morning sunlight caught in his dark hair, illuminating unexpected auburn highlights. When he turned, Sophie was struck again by his commanding presence. Tall and broad-shouldered, in another impeccable suit, this one navy blue with a subtle check pattern. Recognition and surprise crossed his features before he composed them into professional neutrality. "Miss Winters, this is unexpected." Sophie stepped forward, willing her voice not to waver. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Stone." His office was minimalist like the lobby, all clean lines and understated luxury. A massive desk of what appeared to be a single slab of polished wood dominated one side, while a seating area with low-slung leather chairs occupied the other. Abstract art in muted colors adorned the walls. Vivian mentioned this concerns last night's incident. He gestured toward the seating area. "Please." Sophie perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, while Ethan settled opposite her, one ankle resting casually on his knee. He waited, watching her with those intense gray eyes. "I came to apologize properly," she began, meeting his gaze directly. "What happened at Lumière was unfortunate, and while it was an accident, I take full responsibility." "You've already apologized." His voice remained neutral, giving nothing away. "Yes, but not adequately." Sophie reached into her purse and withdrew the envelope. "I'd like to offer compensation for your ruined suit." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly as she placed the envelope on the glass coffee table between them. "I understand it won't cover the full cost, but it's what I can manage at the moment." The admission stung her pride, but honesty seemed the best approach. Ethan made no move to take the envelope. "The restaurant's insurance will cover it." "Still, I'd like to make personal amends." Sophie pressed her hands together to keep them from fidgeting. "I believe in taking responsibility for my actions." "Admirable," he said, his tone softening fractionally. "But unnecessary." A tense silence stretched between them. Sophie had planned for his anger or dismissal, not this calm assessment that made her feel like a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You lost your job." It wasn't a question. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Yes, because of me." Because I spilled drinks on an important customer, Sophie corrected. That's how the service industry works. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. You don't strike me as someone who belongs in the service industry. We all do what we must, Mr. Stone. And what is it you must do, Miss Winters? His question carried unexpected weight. Besides bringing me ruined apologies for apologies. Sophie shifted, unnerved by his perceptiveness. Support myself and my daughter while finishing my degree. Something changed in his expression, a flicker of genuine interest breaking through the cool facade. What degree? Economics, with a focus on sustainable business development. She hadn't meant to share so much, but his sudden attention caught her off guard. Ethan leaned forward slightly. From? Westlake University, night program. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Professor Hammond still teaching there? Sophie blinked in surprise. Yes, actually. I have his financial markets class this semester. His exams are brutal, especially the section on derivatives. A hint of shared experience softened his features momentarily. You're doing this while raising a child alone? The question struck uncomfortably close to her vulnerabilities. My daughter is 6, and yes, I manage. Barely, I'd imagine, on a waitress's salary. His bluntness was almost refreshing compared to the pitying tone most people adopted. Sophie's spine stiffened. We do fine, thank you. And now you're offering me money you clearly need for yourself. Ethan gestured toward the envelope with a slight frown. Why? Because it's right. Sophie held his gaze. Just because things are difficult doesn't mean I abandon my principles. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Respect, perhaps, or simple curiosity. He studied her with those penetrating gray eyes, as if seeing beyond the second-hand suit to the person beneath. What will you do now? For work? Sophie hadn't expected the conversation to turn this way. Find another position. I have applications out already. At restaurants? Wherever will hire me. Her cheeks burned at the admission, but pride wouldn't feed Lily. Ethan stood abruptly, moving to the window. His reflection showed a furrowed brow as he gazed out at the city. Your economics background, do you have administrative experience as well? Some. I worked in the university financial aid office before Lily was born. Sophie watched him cautiously, uncertain where this was leading. He turned back to face her. My personal assistant is taking maternity leave next week. Her temporary replacement just backed out. Sophie's heart stuttered. Are you? The position is for 3 months, possibly 4. It pays considerably better than waiting tables. His tone remained businesslike, but something in his eyes had softened. The hours would be long but regular, 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. You're offering me a job? Sophie couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. I'm offering you an interview, he corrected. Vivian would make the final decision. She runs my office with terrifying efficiency. Sophie hesitated, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Why would you do this? Ethan returned to his seat, his expression unreadable. Let's call it a mutually beneficial arrangement. I need someone competent who can start immediately. You need employment that doesn't involve balancing trays near expensive suits. The teasing undercurrent in his last words surprised her into a small smile. I am excellent at not spilling things under normal circumstances. I should hope so. A hint of answering amusement touched his eyes. The job would involve scheduling, correspondence, some travel arrangements. Your economics background would be useful. I often need someone who understands financial terminology. Sophie's mind raced through the implications. The salary would almost certainly be better than restaurant work. Regular hours meant predictable childcare. A step toward a business career rather than another service job. What about Lily? She asked, her daughter's welfare automatically her first concern. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Your daughter? The position doesn't involve childcare, if that's what you're asking. No, I mean, the hours. After-school programs typically end at 5. I'd need to arrange. We can discuss accommodations if Vivian approves your application. He spoke matter-of-factly, but the consideration itself was unexpected. 8 to 5 might be workable. Sophie found herself at a loss for words. 24 hours ago, this man had been furious with her. Now he was potentially offering her a lifeline. Why are you really doing this, Mr. Stone? He met her gaze directly. Let's just say I recognize determination when I see it. You could have sent an apology note or done nothing at all. Instead, you came here in person, prepared to make amends at significant personal cost. He gestured to the untouched envelope. That suggests character. Or foolishness, Sophie countered. A genuine smile briefly transformed his stern features. Perhaps a bit of both. The interview would be tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you're interested. Sophie took a deep breath. I am. Good. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Vivian will email you the details. Bring your resume. Sophie rose, still processing this unexpected turn of events. As she moved toward the door, Ethan called after her. Miss Winters? She turned back. Your money. He nodded toward the envelope still sitting on the table. Sophie hesitated. I meant what I said about taking responsibility. Consider your responsibility fulfilled through other means. His voice remained firm. Take it. She retrieved the envelope, tucking it back into her purse. At the door, she paused, turning back to face him. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for the opportunity, not just the consideration. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Don't thank me yet, Miss Winters. Vivian makes Marine drill instructors look lenient. The unexpected humor startled a genuine laugh from Sophie, and for a moment, they shared a surprisingly comfortable look of understanding. I'll see you tomorrow then, she said, oddly reluctant to leave. Ethan nodded, his expression returning to professional neutrality, though something warmer lingered in his eyes. Tomorrow. After Sophie left, Ethan remained standing by the window, gazing unseeing at the city below. The encounter had left him oddly unsettled. He'd expected to feel satisfied after accepting her apology, perhaps even smugly benevolent for granting her an interview. Instead, he felt intrigued, challenged even. Sophie Winters wasn't what he'd expected. Most people approached him with either sycophantic deference or thinly veiled ambition. She'd offered neither, just honest accountability and a dignity that her circumstances couldn't diminish. And those eyes, direct and unflinching, even when his position intimidated her. How many people in his life actually looked at him that way? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his own distraction. This was ridiculous. She was simply a candidate for a temporary position, one with relevant skills and immediate availability. The fact that he found her intriguing was irrelevant. His phone buzzed with a message from Vivian. Interview scheduled for S. Winters, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Resume requested. Background check initiated. Ethan typed back. Thorough but expedited, please. Potential immediate start. A moment later. Understood. Any particular qualifications I should focus on? He hesitated, then replied. Economics background. Administrative experience. Assess for discretion and adaptability. Setting down his phone, Ethan returned to his desk, determined to focus on work. Yet, as he reviewed quarterly projections, his thoughts kept drifting to a pair of determined eyes and the unexpected spark he'd felt in their owner's presence. A complication he neither needed nor wanted, and yet, strangely, couldn't seem to regret. An unexpected offer. The microwave clock read 5:42 a.m. when Sophie jolted awake on the couch, her economics textbook still open on her chest. She hadn't meant to fall asleep while studying, but exhaustion had claimed her after tucking Lily in. Rubbing her stiff neck, she closed the book and padded quietly to her small kitchen table. Last night's calculations stared back at her from a notepad. Even with the $300 she'd nearly given away to Ethan Stone, her finances looked grim. Rent was due in 10 days. The electricity bill had a red final notice stamp across it, and Lily needed new shoes for school. Her current pair was held together with duct tape and optimism. Sophie brewed coffee in the ancient percolator, her mind spinning with possibilities. If she got the job at Stone Enterprises, the immediate crisis would be averted. If not, she might need to withdraw from her economics course to free up evenings for a second job. The thought made her stomach clench. Another semester delayed, another step back from her goals. "Mommy, are you making pancakes?" Sophie turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, curls tangled from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Even in the dimly lit kitchen, her daughter's hopeful expression pierced Sophie's heart. "Good morning, sunshine." Sophie scooped her up, inhaling the sweet scent of baby shampoo in her hair. "I promised pancakes, didn't I? With chocolate chips?" Lily's eyes brightened. Sophie opened the nearly empty cupboard, finding the half-full bag of chocolate chips she'd been saving. "Looks like you're in luck." As she mixed batter and heated the skillet, Sophie maintained a cheerful patter with Lily about school and friends. Inside, her mind raced through preparations for today's interview. Her one professional outfit was already laid out. Mrs. Abernathy had agreed to pick up Lily from school if the interview ran late. "Mommy, why do you look worried?" Lily asked, chocolate smudging her cheek. Sophie smoothed her daughter's hair. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff." "Is it because you don't work at the fancy restaurant anymore?" Sometimes Sophie forgot how perceptive her 6-year-old could be. "Yes, but it's okay. I might get an even better job today." "With the angry man whose clothes you spilled on?" Sophie nearly dropped her coffee mug. "How did you know about that?" Lily shrugged, poking at her pancake. "I heard you telling Mrs. Abernathy. Is he still angry at you?" "No, sweetheart. Actually, he's giving me a chance at a new job." "Is he nice now?" Sophie considered the question, recalling Ethan's unexpected offer. "I'm not sure nice is the right word, but he's fair." "Will you have to work at night again?" Lily's small voice carried a weight Sophie felt in her chest. "If I get this job, I'll work during the day while you're at school." Sophie cupped her daughter's cheek. "And I'll be home for dinner and bedtime stories every night." Lily's face brightened. "Every night?" "Every single one." The promise felt both wonderful and terrifying. She hadn't dared hope for regular hours in years. After breakfast, Sophie helped Lily dress for school, packed her lunch with the last of their groceries, and walked her to the bus stop. As they waited, Lily fidgeted with the strap of her backpack. "Mommy?" "Yes, Bug?" "If the angry man gives you a job, you should tell him thank you." Lily's earnest expression made Sophie's throat tighten. "Mrs. Chen says we should always say thank you when someone helps us." Sophie knelt to Lily's level. "You're absolutely right. I will." The yellow school bus appeared around the corner. Sophie hugged Lily tightly. "Be good today. I love you more than all the stars." "Love you more than all the planets," Lily replied, their familiar refrain. As the bus pulled away, Sophie took a deep breath. She had exactly 3 hours to prepare for an interview that could change everything. The Stone Enterprises executive floor hummed with quiet efficiency. Sophie sat in a sleek reception area outside Vivian Mercer's office, hands folded in her lap to keep from fidgeting with her resume folder. Her navy suit felt even more inadequate today as she watched impeccably dressed professionals stride purposefully past. At precisely 10 a.m., Vivian's door opened. "Miss Winters, please come in." The executive assistant's office was smaller than Ethan's, but no less intimidating. Meticulously organized, with not a paper out of place. Vivian gestured to a chair opposite her desk. "Mr. Stone informed me of your unusual introduction." Vivian's expression remained neutral. "While the circumstances are certainly unorthodox, I appreciate punctuality. Let's begin." What followed was the most thorough interview Sophie had ever experienced. Vivian probed her administrative skills, quizzed her on financial terminology, and presented hypothetical scheduling conflicts that made Sophie's head spin. Throughout, Vivian maintained an inscrutable expression, offering neither encouragement nor disapproval. Your economics background is relevant, Vivian admitted, reviewing Sophie's transcript. Professor Hammond's endorsement is particularly noteworthy. He rarely provides references. Sophie blinked in surprise. I didn't provide Professor Hammond as a reference. Vivian arched an eyebrow. Mr. Stone took the liberty of contacting him directly. The revelation that Ethan had gone to such lengths stunned Sophie into momentary silence. Hammond was notoriously selective about his recommendations, and she hadn't even known Ethan had reached out to him. Now, Vivian continued, let's discuss the potential difficulties. This position requires discretion, flexibility, and occasionally, long hours. You mentioned childcare concerns yesterday. Sophie straightened. My daughter is in school until 3:30, and after-school care until 5:00. I can arrange additional coverage when needed for late meetings. Mr. Stone mentioned your start and end times might be adjusted to accommodate your situation. Vivian's tone suggested this was highly unusual. However, emergencies arise. How would you handle those? I have a support network, my neighbor Mrs. Abernathy, and a friend who can help with short notice. Sophie met Vivian's gaze directly. I understand the demands of the position, and I can assure you my personal responsibilities won't interfere with my professional ones. Vivian studied her for a long moment. The salary is $65,000 for the 3-month contract, with potential for extension or permanent placement depending on performance. Health benefits begin immediately. Does that seem acceptable? Sophie fought to keep her expression neutral, even as her heart leaped. The figure was more than double what she'd made at Lumière. Yes, that would be acceptable. One last question, Miss Winters. Vivian leaned forward slightly. Why should I hire someone who has no corporate experience and whose last job ended with an incident involving my employer? Sophie took a deep breath. Because that incident revealed more about my character than a typical interview could. You now know I take responsibility for my mistakes, that I value making things right, and that I can face difficult situations with dignity. She paused. Additionally, having already embarrassed myself thoroughly in front of Mr. Stone, I have nothing left to fear and everything to prove. To Sophie's surprise, Vivian's stern expression cracked into a slight smile. Well put. She closed the folder. I'll discuss your application with Mr. Stone and call you this afternoon. As Sophie rose to leave, Vivian added, For what it's worth, Miss Winters, anyone who can handle Professor Hammond's derivatives exam can likely handle Ethan Stone's schedule. Ethan stood at his office window, watching pedestrians stream along the sidewalks 50 stories below. His morning had been packed with meetings, yet his thoughts kept straying to the interview happening in Vivian's office. A knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. Enter. Vivian appeared, carrying a folder. I've completed the interview with Miss Winters. And? She's qualified despite her unconventional background. Vivian's tone gave nothing away. Her understanding of financial concepts is impressive for someone still completing their degree. Professor Hammond speaks highly of her analytical abilities. Ethan nodded, oddly pleased. What about the practical concerns? Her childcare situation is manageable with the adjusted hours you suggested. Vivian raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Which, I should note, is the first time in 7 years you've authorized flexible hours for any staff member. Ethan ignored the observation. Your recommendation? Professionally, she would be suitable for the position. Vivian hesitated. Though I feel compelled to ask why you're personally intervening in this hire. It's unusual. Ethan turned back to the window, avoiding Vivian's perceptive gaze. Let's call it making amends for an overreaction that cost someone their livelihood. So this is about guilt? It's about recognizing potential being wasted in the wrong field. Even as he said it, Ethan knew it wasn't the complete truth. Something about Sophie Winters had captured his attention in a way he found both irritating and intriguing. Well, in that case, Vivian said, her tone suggesting she didn't entirely believe him. "I recommend we proceed with the offer. She can start Monday." "Make it Thursday," Ethan replied. "Give her a few days to arrange childcare and complete her current coursework." Vivian's expression betrayed rare surprise before she composed it. "Of course, I'll call her this afternoon." After Vivian left, Ethan settled behind his desk, attempting to focus on quarterly projections. Instead, his mind kept circling back to Sophie's determined expression when she'd placed that envelope on his table. The gesture had stirred something unexpected. Respect, certainly, but also a strange protectiveness he didn't typically feel toward virtual strangers. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother, James. "Still on for dinner tonight? Need to discuss the charity gala." Ethan frowned. He'd forgotten about the Stone Foundation's annual gala, a lavish fundraiser that required his presence, but typically bored him senseless. An idea formed. His new assistant would need to understand the full scope of his obligations, including social and charitable functions. Perhaps this would be an appropriate introduction to that aspect of the job. He texted back, confirmed. 7 p.m. at Aurelia. Bringing a new team member to discuss the gala planning. James replied immediately. "New team member? This I have to see." Ethan set down his phone, wondering what had possessed him to make such a spontaneous decision. He rarely mixed professional and personal boundaries this way. Yet the thought of introducing Sophie to the Stone Foundation's work, the meaningful side of his wealth that the public rarely saw, appealed to him for reasons he wasn't ready to examine. First, however, she needed to accept the position. Ethan found himself unusually eager for Vivian's call to confirm Sophie's response, a sentiment that both irritated and puzzled him in equal measure. Sophie paced her tiny apartment, phone clutched in her hand. The interview had ended hours ago, and every minute that passed without a call increased her anxiety. Had she been too bold, too honest? Had Vivian seen through her confident facade to the desperation beneath? When the phone finally rang, she nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. "Hello? Miss Winters?" Vivian's crisp voice came through clearly. "I'm calling regarding the position we discussed this morning." Sophie closed her eyes, bracing herself. "Yes?" "We'd like to offer you the contract, starting Thursday. The salary and terms are as we discussed." There was a pause. "Mr. Stone has specifically requested you join him for a business dinner tonight to discuss an upcoming foundation event. He'll send a car to your address at 6:30. Sophie sank onto the couch, legs suddenly weak with relief. Yes, I accept the position. And the dinner." "Excellent. Business attire is appropriate. The restaurant is Aurelia." Vivian's tone softened slightly. "Congratulations, Miss Winters. I'll email the contract details shortly." After hanging up, Sophie sat in stunned silence. She had a job, a real professional position with benefits and regular hours, and apparently a business dinner tonight with Ethan Stone himself. The elation of securing the job quickly gave way to panic about the dinner. She had nothing appropriate to wear to an upscale business meeting. Her interview suit was the only professional outfit she owned, and after 2 days of wear, it needed cleaning. As if sensing her mother's distress, Lily's voice called from the doorway where she stood with Mrs. Abernathy. "Mommy, did you get the job with the angry man?" Sophie crossed the room and scooped her daughter into a tight hug. "I did, Bug. I really did." Over Lily's head, she met Mrs. Abernathy's kind gaze. "And I'm going to need a tremendous favor tonight. New beginnings, new tensions." Sophie smoothed her navy pencil skirt for the 5th time as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor of Stone Enterprises. The modest business outfit, purchased yesterday with her last bit of savings, felt like armor against the uncertainty awaiting her. Her heartbeat quickened with each ascending floor number. "You've got this," she whispered to her reflection in the polished elevator doors. "It's just a job." Except it wasn't just any job. It was a lifeline thrown by the most infuriating, handsome man she'd ever encountered. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open to reveal a sleek reception area where modern furnishings met floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the city skyline. Sophie took a steadying breath and stepped forward, clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. Sophie Brooks? She turned to find Ethan Stone emerging from a hallway, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes when he saw her. Surprise, perhaps, that she'd actually shown up. "Mr. Stone?" She extended her hand with more confidence than she felt. "Reporting for duty." Ethan's warm palm enveloped hers, the brief contact sending an unwelcome tingle up her arm. "Just Ethan is fine in the office. Let me introduce you to the team." As they walked through the open workspace, Sophie felt curious glances following them. Whispers trailed in their wake. "Everyone," Ethan announced to the nearby staff, "this is Sophie Brooks, my temporary personal assistant." Several eyebrows rose at the introduction. Sophie caught a particularly sharp look from a polished blonde at the corner desk. "Melissa can show you to your desk," Ethan continued, nodding toward a friendly-looking woman with a pixie cut. "I expect you in my office in 15 minutes to go over today's schedule." With that, he disappeared behind a frosted glass door, leaving Sophie to navigate the curious stairs alone. "Don't mind them," Melissa whispered as she led Sophie to a desk positioned just outside Ethan's office. "It's just that Ethan never hires assistants without corporate experience. You must be special." Sophie's cheeks warmed. "Hardly. I just make a mean cappuccino." Ethan stared at his computer screen without really seeing it. What had possessed him to hire a barista as his personal assistant? Yet the memory of Sophie's determined expression as she defended her grandfather's shop lingered. That same fire might be exactly what he needed to bring order to his chaotic schedule. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Sophie entered, notebook in hand, chin lifted with determination that couldn't quite mask her nervousness. The simple business attire transformed her from the casual barista he'd met into someone unexpectedly professional. "I understand you have a conference call at 10 and a lunch meeting with the development team at noon," she said without preamble. "Melissa briefed me on your filing system and gave me access to your calendar. I've already organized today's agenda." She placed a neatly typed schedule on his desk. Ethan picked it up, surprised by her initiative. "You work quickly." "I ran a coffee shop for years, Mr. Stone. Multitasking under pressure is my specialty." A hint of challenge sparked in her eyes. "Are there any specific expectations you have for me?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I expect punctuality, discretion, and excellence. My previous assistant left without notice, leaving several projects in disarray. Your priority will be bringing order to that chaos." "I can handle chaos." The corner of her mouth twitched. "Though I should warn you, I ask questions when instructions aren't clear. I believe in doing things right the first time." "I prefer directness to mistakes," he replied, suddenly intrigued by the steel beneath her polite demeanor. "Any other warnings I should know about?" "Just one." Sophie's eyes met his directly. "I may be grateful for this opportunity, but I won't be a doormat. I respect expertise, not titles." The unexpected declaration should have irritated him. Instead, Ethan found himself suppressing a smile. "Noted. The quarterly reports need reorganizing before my board meeting tomorrow. Start there." As Sophie left his office, Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This arrangement would be interesting, at the very least. By mid-afternoon, Sophie's confidence had grown alongside her to-do list. She'd spent hours organizing Ethan's chaotic filing system, fielding calls, and familiarizing herself with ongoing projects. Though overwhelmed by the volume of information, she refused to show it. "Sophie," Ethan's voice came through the intercom on her desk. "Bring the Henderson contract." She located the document and entered his office, where Ethan sat reviewing papers, sunlight catching the hints of auburn in his dark hair. He accepted the contract without looking up. "Wait," he said as she turned to leave. "I need your eyes on something." Sophie circled his desk cautiously, standing close enough to see the document, but maintaining professional distance. The subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly masculine, momentarily distracted her. "Section 4, paragraph 3, he pointed. "Does anything seem off?" Sophie forced her attention to the indicated text, scanning the legal language carefully. "The percentages don't match what's stated in Exhibit B," she noted after a moment. "They've listed 15% here, but 20 in the appendix." Ethan looked up at her, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Exactly. Most people miss that." "I handled all the vendor contracts at my grandfather's shop," she explained with a shrug. "You learn to read the fine print when suppliers try to change terms." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a new assessment forming behind those intense eyes. "Make a note to have legal revise this before tomorrow's meeting." As Sophie returned to her desk, she couldn't help feeling a small thrill of victory. She wasn't just surviving this job, she might actually be good at it. The afternoon sun slanted through Ethan's office windows as he watched Sophie efficiently reorganize the quarterly reports. She'd worked through lunch, declining his offer to order something in favor of finishing the task. Her diligence surprised him. "These projections don't align with the market analysis," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Ethan looked up from his laptop. "Which ones?" Sophie approached, laying the reports before him and pointing to specific figures. Her floral perfume, subtle and fresh, drifted over him as she leaned closer. "If these estimates are based on last quarter's growth, they're too conservative given the new contract with Westlake Industries." Ethan studied her profile, momentarily distracted by the intelligence animating her features. She wasn't just going through motions, she was actually understanding the material. "You have a background in finance?" he asked. Sophie straightened, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, but numbers tell stories if you pay attention." A shadow crossed her face. "I learned that watching my grandfather's business struggle." Ethan nodded, oddly touched by her candor. "You're right about the projections. Make a note for the CFO." As she returned to organizing, Ethan found himself repeatedly glancing her way. Sophie Brooks was proving to be far more than he had expected. By 5:30, Sophie's feet ached in her new heels, but satisfaction outweighed discomfort. She'd survived her first day, more than survived. She'd organized Ethan's schedule for the week, caught a contract discrepancy, and gained a tentative foothold in this unfamiliar world. "I'll finish these tomorrow," she said, gathering remaining files as Ethan emerged from his office, suit jacket draped over his arm. "Leave them. You've done enough today." His voice held something almost like approval. "How did you find your first day?" Sophie considered her answer carefully. "Challenging," she admitted, "but in a good way." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "You surprised me today, Sophie." "Is that your way of saying I didn't completely fail?" She couldn't resist the light tease, fatigue lowering her professional guard. His expression softened momentarily. "It's my way of saying you exceeded expectations." He glanced at his watch. "Do you need a ride home? It's getting late." The offer caught Sophie off guard. "I'm fine taking the bus, but thank you." Ethan frowned. "It's after hours and you've had a long day. Let me drive you." His tone suggested he wasn't accustomed to having his offers refused. Sophie hesitated, weighing professional boundaries against practical considerations. "If you insist," she finally conceded. "But just this once. I don't want special treatment." The elevator ride to the parking garage was charged with a new awareness. Standing side by side, neither speaking, Sophie couldn't help noticing how different this felt from their previous encounters. The antagonism remained, but underneath it lay something more complex, a reluctant respect forming on both sides. In the close quarters of his sleek black sedan, the silence between them shifted from awkward to contemplative. Sophie gazed out the window as city lights began twinkling in the early evening darkness. Left at the next light, she directed, breaking the quiet. The building with the blue awning. As Ethan pulled up to her apartment building, Sophie gathered her purse. Thank you for the ride, and for giving me this chance. Ethan's hands remained on the steering wheel, his profile illuminated by passing headlights. You earned your place today, Sophie. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Something in his tone, an unexpected warmth, lingered with Sophie as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Despite her exhaustion, a smile tugged at her lips. She had survived day one in Ethan Stone's world, and somehow, impossibly, she was looking forward to day two. Collision of worlds, Sophie's fingers flew across her keyboard, the quiet tapping a counterpoint to the rain pattering against the office windows. 3 days into her new position, and she was finally finding her rhythm. Ethan's impossible schedule now made sense. His filing system no longer resembled an ancient labyrinth, and she'd even earned a grudging "well done" after reorganizing his presentation for tomorrow's investors. A small victory, but Sophie treasured it like a rare gem. The office phone's shrill ring interrupted her concentration. Mr. Stone's office, Sophie Brooks speaking. Ms. Brooks, this is Nurse Jenkins from Oak Ridge Elementary. The woman's calm, practiced voice instantly sent a jolt of alarm through Sophie's chest. Lily's running a fever of 101. School policy requires she be picked up immediately. Sophie's stomach dropped. Is she okay? Did she fall? Is she... Just the fever and a sore throat, the nurse assured her. But she's asking for you. Sophie glanced at Ethan's closed office door. He was on a conference call with Tokyo investors, a call she had arranged, and that would determine the fate of a major expansion. Interrupting was unthinkable, yet so was leaving Lily alone and sick. I'll be there as soon as possible, she promised, hanging up as her mind raced through impossible solutions. Melissa, who sat at the desk across from hers, looked up with concern. Everything okay? My daughter's sick at school. Sophie rubbed her temples. I need to pick her up, but Ethan's in that important call, and I've only been here 3 days, and... You have to tell him, Melissa said gently. He's not a monster, just intense. Sophie nodded, gathering her courage as she approached his door. When the conference call ended 5 minutes later, she knocked softly. Come in. Ethan sat behind his desk, tie loosened slightly, cuffs rolled back to reveal strong forearms as he reviewed figures on his tablet. The late morning light caught the angles of his face, highlighting the determined set of his jaw. Mr. Stone, I apologize for the interruption, but I have an emergency. He looked up, his expression sharpening at her troubled tone. What's wrong? My daughter's school just called. Lily's running a fever, and I need to pick her up. Sophie straightened her shoulders, professional despite her racing heart. I understand this is incredibly inconvenient, especially with the Nakamura presentation tomorrow. I can try to find someone else to... Personal issues can't interfere with work, he growled, running a hand through his hair. We have deadlines. Sophie felt her cheeks flush. I understand, but she's 6 and sick. I don't have family in the city, and my neighbor who usually helps is away this week. Something in Ethan's expression shifted as he looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the worry she was trying so hard to contain. How far is her school? He asked, his tone suddenly neutral. About 20 minutes by bus, 30 in this rain. Ethan stood, surprising her as he reached for his phone. Harrison can take you. Harrison? My driver. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Harrison, I need you to take Ms. Brooks to... He looked at Sophie expectantly. Oak Ridge Elementary on Maple Street, she supplied, still processing his unexpected offer. Oak Ridge Elementary. Wait for her and then drive her and her daughter home. He paused, listening to the response. Yes, now, thank you. Sophie stared at him, momentarily speechless. Thank you, but what about the Nakamura presentation? The quarterly reports? Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Take your laptop. You can finish the reports from home if your daughter's condition allows. His voice softened, almost imperceptibly. Children come first, Sophie. The simple statement, delivered in that deep voice now stripped of its usual edge, caught her completely off guard. Harrison will be out front in 5 minutes, Ethan continued, already turning back to his work. Keep me updated on your progress. Sophie nodded, still stunned by his understanding. Thank you. I won't let you down. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I know you won't. 20 minutes later, Sophie rushed into the school nurse's office to find Lily curled on a cot, her cheeks flushed and golden curls damp against her forehead. Mommy! Lily's voice was hoarse, but her eyes brightened instantly. Sophie gathered her daughter into her arms, brushing back sweaty strands of hair. Hey, Bug, not feeling so great today, huh? Lily shook her head, burying her face against Sophie's shoulder. My throat hurts, and I'm cold, then hot, then cold again. We're going to go home and get you all tucked in with your favorite blanket, and maybe some chicken soup. Sophie signed the checkout forms the nurse offered, balancing Lily on her hip despite her daughter getting too big for such carrying. Is that a taxi? Lily asked as they approached the sleek black car where Harrison waited, umbrella in hand. Not exactly. Sophie smiled as Harrison opened the door, sheltering them from the rain. My boss is letting us borrow his car and drive her today. Lily's eyes widened as she took in the leather seats and tinted windows. Your boss must be really nice. Sophie helped her into the car, considering the statement. You know what? I think he might be nicer than I thought. By early afternoon, Sophie had Lily settled on the living room couch, surrounded by pillows, her stuffed rabbit clutched under one arm, and a half-empty bowl of soup on the coffee table. The children's channel played softly on the television as Lily dozed, her fever reduced thanks to medicine. Sophie sat at the small dining table, laptop open to the quarterly reports, occasionally glancing over to check on her daughter. The apartment felt different somehow with her working here during a weekday, worlds colliding in a way that wasn't entirely uncomfortable. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Ethan Stone. Status update on both the reports and your daughter? Sophie smiled at the unexpected concern embedded in the professional inquiry. Sophie Brooks. Reports at 70%. Lily's fever down to 99.8. Thank you again for understanding. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before his next message arrived. Ethan Stone. Harrison will pick you up at 8:30 tomorrow, if she's well enough to return to school. Sophie stared at the message, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the steaming tea beside her laptop. Sophie Brooks. That's very generous. Thank you. Ethan Stone. It's practical. The Nakamura presentation is at 9:15. She could almost hear his gruff tone, imagined him sitting in his office, pretending the offer was purely about efficiency rather than kindness. The thought made her smile. Ethan placed his phone on his desk, staring out at the rain-streaked city below. The office felt strangely quiet without Sophie's presence, without her efficient movements and occasional humming when she thought no one could hear. He told himself his offer of Harrison's services was purely practical. A good assistant was hard to find, and Sophie had proven herself capable in just 3 days. It made business sense to accommodate her emergency, yet the memory of her face when she'd mentioned her daughter, the flash of worry she'd tried so hard to contain, had stirred something in him he wasn't ready to examine. The determined set of her shoulders as she'd prepared to race across town on public transit in the pouring rain, all while apologizing for the inconvenience. His phone buzzed again. Sophie Brooks. Reports complete and emailed. Presentation revised with latest figures. Lily's asleep on the couch, and I'm working on tomorrow's schedule now. Attached was a photo of the completed Nakamura presentation with her revisions highlighted. Ethan shook his head, impressed despite himself. Even with a sick child, she had managed to exceed expectations. He thought of his own childhood, of the nannies who had cared for him when his parents were too busy with their empire building. Sophie was building her own small empire, A life for herself and her daughter, with far fewer resources but infinitely more heart. The realization was uncomfortable, forcing him to reconsider his initial assessment of her as just another employee, another cog in the corporate wheel. Getting soft, Stone, he muttered to himself, returning to the contract on his desk. Yet he couldn't quite shake the image of Sophie, working at her dining table, her daughter sleeping nearby, determination and tenderness somehow coexisting without diminishing either. The next morning, Sophie rushed around the apartment, simultaneously packing Lily's lunch, checking her temperature, and reviewing her own notes for the Nakamura presentation. "Are you sure you feel well enough for school?" she asked, pressing her palm to Lily's forehead for the third time. "I'm fine, Mommy." Lily rolled her eyes with all the dramatic flair a 6-year-old could muster. "My throat doesn't even hurt anymore." Her temperature had returned to normal overnight, but Sophie couldn't help worrying. "Promise you'll tell your teacher if you start feeling sick again?" "Promise." Lily bit into her toast, then cocked her head thoughtfully. "Is your boss's car coming again? The fancy one with the nice man?" As if summoned by the question, Sophie's phone chimed with a message from Harrison, announcing his arrival downstairs. "Yes, he's here now." Sophie helped Lily into her jacket. "And remember your manners with Mr. Harrison." Lily's face brightened as they stepped outside to find the black car waiting. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," she called as he opened the door. "Thank you for driving us. Mommy says I have to use my manners." Harrison's professional demeanor softened as he smiled at Lily. "Good morning, Miss Lily. Your manners are excellent." Once they were settled in the back seat, Lily whispered loudly, "Your boss must really like you to send his special car 2 times." Sophie felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "It's not about liking, sweetheart. It's about work." "Grandpa says people only share their special things with people they like," Lily countered, with unassailable 6-year-old logic. As they pulled up to Lily's school, Sophie smoothed her daughter's curls and kissed her forehead. "Have a good day, Bug. I love you." "Love you more," Lily called as she skipped toward the entrance, seemingly fully recovered and unburdened by yesterday's illness. When Sophie arrived at the office 15 minutes later, she found a paper cup on her desk, the rich scent of coffee wafting from it. A note in Ethan's precise handwriting sat beside it. "For your Nakamura victory lap." Sophie took a sip, surprised to find it prepared exactly as she liked. 1 sugar, splash of cream. She hadn't realized he'd been paying attention. When Ethan emerged from his office moments later, she offered him a genuine smile. "Thank you for the coffee. And for yesterday." He nodded, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "How's Lily feeling?" The fact that he remembered her daughter's name shouldn't have affected her so strongly, but warmth bloomed in Sophie's chest nonetheless. "Much better. Back to her energetic self." Sophie hesitated, then added, "She was very impressed with your fancy car." A hint of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "Smart kid." He glanced at his watch. "The Nakamura team will be here in 30 minutes. Are we ready?" "Completely ready," Sophie assured him, reaching for the presentation folder. "I've prepared everything exactly as you requested." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the folder, the brief contact sending an unexpected tingle up her arm. His eyes met hers for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. "Good work, Sophie," he said quietly. "Yesterday and today." As he turned toward the conference room, Sophie found herself watching him go, suddenly aware that somewhere between spilled coffee and fevered children, her perception of Ethan Stone had fundamentally changed. The grumpy boss with impossible standards had revealed glimpses of something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster whenever he said her name. "Dangerous territory," she whispered to herself, turning back to her computer. But the warning couldn't quite erase the smile that lingered on her lips. After hours and vulnerabilities. The office had transformed in the late evening hours. Gone was the constant ringing of phones, the hurried footsteps across polished floors, the distant murmur of voices. In their place settled a different kind of energy, intimate, almost suspended in time, as city lights twinkled through floor-to-ceiling windows like earthbound stars. Sophie rubbed her tired eyes, glancing at the clock on her computer screen. 9:47 p.m. The Wellington proposal was due tomorrow at noon, and despite working through lunch and into the evening, they still had sections to finalize. She stretched her arms above her head, her neck protesting with a soft crack. Coffee? Ethan's voice came from the doorway of the conference room where they'd set up camp, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analyses. Sophie looked up, momentarily startled. He'd discarded his suit jacket hours ago, his crisp white shirt now rumpled at the sleeves, where he'd rolled them to his elbows. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. The casual dishevelment suited him in ways that made her pulse quicken. "I've had so much caffeine today, I might never sleep again," she admitted, with a small smile. "But thank you." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, studying her with an unreadable expression. "We should eat something. I can't have my assistant collapsing from hunger before we finish." "I'm fine, really?" Her stomach chose that precise moment to growl loudly, betraying her. A hint of amusement flickered across Ethan's face. "Chinese or Thai?" 20 minutes later, white takeout containers crowded the conference table between stacks of papers, filling the room with the rich scents of garlic, basil, and spice. Sophie closed her eyes in bliss as she savored her first bite of pad thai. "I forget to eat sometimes when I'm working," she confessed. "Bad habit." "One we share, apparently." Ethan picked up a spring roll, his shoulders visibly relaxing as he leaned back in his chair. "My sister claims it's why I'm perpetually grumpy." Sophie nearly choked on her noodles. "You? Grumpy? I hadn't noticed." The dry remark slipped out before she could stop it, and for a heartbeat, she worried she'd overstepped. But then something remarkable happened. Ethan laughed. Not the polite chuckle she'd heard him use with clients, but a genuine deep laugh that transformed his entire face. "Fair point." His eyes met hers, warmer than she'd ever seen them. "Though I've been told I'm improving slightly." "Only slightly," Sophie teased, emboldened by this new, more relaxed version of her boss. "But Lily says your fancy car makes up for it." Mention of her daughter brought a soft expression to Ethan's face. "How is she feeling? Completely recovered?" "Absolutely. You'd never know she was sick. She's been talking nonstop about the businessman's special car to anyone who'll listen." Sophie speared a piece of chicken with her fork. "Thank you again for being so understanding that day." Ethan waved away her gratitude. "It was nothing." "No, it wasn't," Sophie said quietly. "Most employers wouldn't have been so accommodating, especially with someone so new." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. "Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' work obligations." The statement held a weight that suggested personal experience, but Sophie didn't press. Instead, she reached for her water glass, her gaze drifting to the city lights below. "It's beautiful at night," she observed. "You can't see the rough edges from up here." Ethan followed her gaze. "That's the deception of distance. Everything looks perfect when you're removed from it." "Spoken like someone who's spent a lot of time in high places," Sophie noted. "Too much time, probably." He spun his water glass slowly, watching the liquid swirl. "What about you? Before coffee shops and executive assistants, what did you do?" The question surprised her. It was the first time he'd asked about her life beyond work. "I was a business student, actually." Sophie smiled at his raised eyebrow. "Hard to believe?" "Not at all," he replied. "You clearly have a mind for it. What happened?" Sophie hesitated, weighing how much to share. The late hour and shared meal had created an unexpected intimacy between them, making it easier to be honest. "Life happened. I met Lily's father my junior year. Got pregnant my senior year." She shrugged, aiming for casualness. "He decided fatherhood wasn't for him, and I had to choose between finishing my degree or supporting Lily. Not much of a choice, really." Ethan's expression darkened. He left you alone? After hours and vulnerabilities. The office had transformed in the late evening hours. Gone was the constant ringing of phones, the hurried footsteps across polished floors, the distant murmur of voices. In their place settled a different kind of energy, intimate, almost suspended in time, as city lights twinkled through floor-to-ceiling windows like earthbound stars. Sophie rubbed her tired eyes, glancing at the clock on her computer screen. 9:47 p.m. The Wellington proposal was due tomorrow at noon, and despite working through lunch and into the evening, they still had sections to finalize. She stretched her arms above her head, her neck protesting with a soft crack. Coffee? Ethan's voice came from the doorway of the conference room where they'd set up camp, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analyses. Sophie looked up, momentarily startled. He'd discarded his suit jacket hours ago, his crisp white shirt now rumpled at the sleeves, where he'd rolled them to his elbows. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. The casual dishevelment suited him in ways that made her pulse quicken. "I've had so much caffeine today, I might never sleep again," she admitted, with a small smile. "But thank you." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, studying her with an unreadable expression. "We should eat something. I can't have my assistant collapsing from hunger before we finish." "I'm fine, really?" Her stomach chose that precise moment to growl loudly, betraying her. A hint of amusement flickered across Ethan's face. "Chinese or Thai?" 20 minutes later, white takeout containers crowded the conference table between stacks of papers, filling the room with the rich scents of garlic, basil, and spice. Sophie closed her eyes in bliss as she savored her first bite of pad thai. "I forget to eat sometimes when I'm working," she confessed. "Bad habit." "One we share, apparently." Ethan picked up a spring roll, his shoulders visibly relaxing as he leaned back in his chair. "My sister claims it's why I'm perpetually grumpy." Sophie nearly choked on her noodles. "You? Grumpy? I hadn't noticed." The dry remark slipped out before she could stop it, and for a heartbeat, she worried she'd overstepped. But then something remarkable happened. Ethan laughed. Not the polite chuckle she'd heard him use with clients, but a genuine, deep laugh that transformed his entire face. "Fair point." His eyes met hers, warmer than she'd ever seen them. "Though I've been told I'm improving slightly." "Only slightly," Sophie teased, emboldened by this new, more relaxed version of her boss. "But Lily says your fancy car makes up for it." Mention of her daughter brought a soft expression to Ethan's face. "How is she feeling? Completely recovered?" "Absolutely. You'd never know she was sick. She's been talking nonstop about the businessman's special car to anyone who'll listen." Sophie speared a piece of chicken with her fork. "Thank you again for being so understanding that day." Ethan waved away her gratitude. "It was nothing." "No, it wasn't," Sophie said quietly. "Most employers wouldn't have been so accommodating, especially with someone so new." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. "Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' work obligations." The statement held a weight that suggested personal experience, but Sophie didn't press. Instead, she reached for her water glass, her gaze drifting to the city lights below. "It's beautiful at night," she observed. "You can't see the rough edges from up here." Ethan followed her gaze. "That's the deception of distance. Everything looks perfect when you're removed from it." "Spoken like someone who's spent a lot of time in high places," Sophie noted. "Too much time, probably." He spun his water glass slowly, watching the liquid swirl. "What about you? Before coffee shops and executive assistants, what did you do?" The question surprised her. It was the first time he'd asked about her life beyond work. "I was a business student, actually." Sophie smiled at his raised eyebrow. "Hard to believe?" "Not at all," he replied. "You clearly have a mind for it. What happened?" Sophie hesitated, weighing how much to share. The late hour and shared meal had created an unexpected intimacy between them, making it easier to be honest. Life happened. I met Lily's father my junior year. Got pregnant my senior year. She shrugged, aiming for casualness. He decided fatherhood wasn't for him, and I had to choose between finishing my degree or supporting Lily. Not much of a choice, really. Ethan's expression darkened. He left you alone? That sounds lonely, Sophie observed, before she could censor herself. Something raw and honest flashed in Ethan's eyes. It can be, he admitted. Building something meaningful often means sacrificing other things. Like architectural dreams? Among others. He stood, moving to the windows, his silhouette outlined against the city lights. My last serious relationship ended because I couldn't give her what she needed. Time, attention, the parts of me that were always focused elsewhere. Sophie joined him at the window, keeping a respectful distance while drawn by this rare glimpse into his private thoughts. Business demands compromise, he continued, his reflection in the glass oddly vulnerable. Personal relationships require presence. I've never found the balance. Maybe you haven't found the right reason to try, Sophie suggested gently. Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps. They stood side by side, looking out at the glittering city below, the moment stretching between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. Sophie became acutely aware of his proximity, of the subtle scent of his cologne mingled with the faint coffee and mint that seemed uniquely his. We should finish the proposal, she said finally, her voice softer than intended. Ethan nodded, the spell broken but not forgotten. Let's wrap this up so you can get home to Lily. They worked through the remaining sections with renewed focus, but something fundamental had shifted between them. Casual comments carried new meaning, brief glances held longer than before. The occasional brush of hands as they passed documents seemed charged with awareness. By midnight, the proposal was complete, the office quiet except for the soft hum of the climate system. Sophie gathered her things, exhaustion settling into her bones even as her mind remained strangely alert, replaying moments of their conversation. I'll drive you home, Ethan said, reaching for his jacket. You don't have to. It's late, Sophie. His tone brooked no argument. And you've gone above and beyond tonight. The drive through nighttime streets was peaceful, the city transformed by darkness and scattered lights. In the intimate confines of his car, the evening's revelations seemed to hover between them, unspoken but acknowledged. Thank you for sharing about your studies, Ethan said as they approached her building. You should be proud of what you're accomplishing. Sophie smiled, touched by his recognition. Thank you for the glimpse of architect Ethan. I think he and businessman Ethan might have more in common than you realize. A smile touched his lips as he pulled up to her building. How so? Both build things meant to last, she said simply. One with concrete, one with contracts, but the instinct is the same. Ethan's expression softened in a way that made her heart beat faster. I've never thought of it that way. Maybe you should, she suggested, gathering her purse. Good night, Ethan, and thank you. For dinner, for the ride, for the conversation, he supplied when she hesitated. Sophie nodded, suddenly shy. Yes, that. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Good night, Sophie, he said finally, his voice warm in the darkness. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Sophie felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her burdens had physically lifted a weight. Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly babysitter, dozed on the couch, the television playing softly. After seeing her out, Sophie tiptoed to Lily's room, finding her daughter peacefully asleep, curls splayed across her pillow. Love you, bug, she whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead. Later, as Sophie prepared for bed, Her phone chimed with a text message. Ethan Stone. Proposal submitted to Wellington team for morning review. Take your time coming in tomorrow. You've earned it. Sophie smiled at the message, typing her reply. Sophie Brooks. You work just as hard. Maybe you should take your own advice. His response came almost immediately. Ethan Stone. Some habits are hard to break. Good night, Sophie. Sophie Brooks. Good night, Ethan. She set her phone aside, her mind replaying moments from the evening. Ethan's rare laugh, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of architecture, the way he'd listened to her dreams without dismissing them. Something had changed tonight, a shift subtle yet profound. For the first time since starting at Stone Enterprises, Sophie found herself thinking of Ethan not as her demanding boss, but as a man with his own complicated history, his own unrealized dreams, his own carefully guarded heart. The realization should have concerned her. Professional boundaries existed for a reason. Instead, as sleep finally claimed her, Sophie found herself wondering about the other layers waiting to be discovered beneath Ethan Stone's carefully constructed exterior, and what it might mean that she so desperately wanted to discover them. Across town, in his penthouse apartment, Ethan stood at his own window, city lights spread before him, like a reflection of the stars hidden by urban glow. Sleep eluded him, his mind stubbornly returning to the conference room, to Sophie's honest eyes as she spoke of her dreams, to the unexpected ease of their conversation. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken about architecture, about the boyhood passion his father had methodically discouraged. Something about Sophie had made the admission feel natural, even freeing. Her strength had surprised him, raising a child alone, pursuing education despite obstacles, facing each day with determination rather than resentment. Where he'd expected to find bitterness, he discovered resilience and quiet hope. Ethan moved away from the window, loosening his tie as he prepared for the few hours of sleep he might capture before dawn. Professional boundaries existed for a reason, he reminded himself. Sophie Brooks was his employee, temporary at that. The connection he'd felt tonight was simply the result of fatigue and shared effort toward a common goal. Yet as he finally drifted toward sleep, it was Sophie's smile he saw, warm, genuine, and dangerously easy to get used to. The little visitor, Sophie, paced her tiny kitchen, phone pressed to her ear as dawn light filtered through the blinds. Mrs. Abernathy, I completely understand. Your health comes first, she assured her elderly neighbor, even as panic bubbled in her chest. No, please don't worry about us. Feel better soon. She ended the call and pressed her fingers to her temples. Of all days for her reliable babysitter to come down with the flu, it had to be when school was closed for teacher training and she had a crucial meeting with Ethan and the board. Mommy, is Mrs. A sick? Lily appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her favorite purple unicorn leggings and a slightly mismatched yellow top, her curls wild from sleep. Sophie nodded, mind racing through impossible options. Her neighbor Kate was away visiting family. Her grandfather was having physical therapy this morning. The community daycare required advance registration. Bug, how would you feel about coming to work with Mommy today? The words left her mouth before she could reconsider. Lily's eyes widened, excitement blooming across her small face. To the big building with the fancy car, where Mr. Grumpy works. Sophie winced at the nickname Lily had adopted for Ethan, despite never having met him. His name is Mr. Stone, remember? And yes, you'd need to be on your very best behavior. Super quiet and extra polite. I can be quiet as a mouse, Lily stage whispered, bouncing on her toes. Can I bring my coloring books? And sparkles? She clutched her well-loved stuffed unicorn. Sophie checked the time, 7:15. Not enough to find another solution. Yes to coloring books, yes to sparkles. Now let's find you a more office-appropriate outfit. An hour later, Sophie stepped off the elevator at Stone Enterprises, clutching Lily's hand perhaps too tightly. Her daughter looked angelic in a neat blue dress and cardigan, hair tamed into 2 braids, a small backpack of quiet activities slung over her shoulders. Sophie had texted Melissa about the situation, praying Ethan wouldn't arrive until after the administrative assistant could help her set Lily up somewhere discreet. Wow! Lily breathed, taking in the sleek office with wide eyes. It's like a castle made of windows. Sophie! Melissa hurried over, her kind face a welcome sight. And this must be Lily. Hello there. Hi! Lily beamed, extending her hand with practiced politeness. I'm being very quiet today because I'm a special guest. Melissa laughed, shaking the offered hand. Very nice to meet you. I have the perfect spot all ready for you. She led them to a small, unused office near Sophie's desk. I brought in some snacks and juice boxes from the break room. Melissa, you're a lifesaver, Sophie said, setting up Lily's coloring books and iPad at the desk. I'll check on you between meetings, Bug. Remember our rules? Stay in this room, use inside voice, and don't interrupt grown-ups who are working, Lily recited dutifully. Sophie kissed the top of her head. Perfect. Mommy has to prepare for a meeting now, but I'll be right outside. Just as Sophie settled at her desk, the elevator dinged, and Ethan strode into the office, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His confident stride faltered momentarily when he spotted the child-sized backpack beside Sophie's desk. Good morning, Sophie greeted him, trying to sound casual. The quarterly reports are ready for review, and the conference room is prepared for the board meeting at 10. Ethan's eyes narrowed, gaze shifting between Sophie and the small office, where Lily sat contentedly coloring. Do we have a new intern I wasn't informed about? The dry humor caught her off guard. My babysitter has the flu, and school's closed for teacher training, Sophie explained quickly. I promise she won't disrupt anything. She has books and activities to keep her occupied. Ethan's expression remained unreadable. I see. I'll make other arrangements immediately if it's a problem, Sophie added, stomach tight with anxiety. Ethan checked his watch. The board members will be here in 90 minutes. As long as she's quiet during the meeting, it's fine for today. Relief washed through Sophie. Thank you. She will be, I promise. Ethan nodded curtly and disappeared into his office, leaving Sophie to release the breath she'd been holding. That had gone better than expected, though his clipped tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased with the arrangement. The morning progressed smoothly as Sophie prepared final documents and handled calls. She checked on Lily periodically, finding her alternately coloring, playing quietly with sparkles, or watching educational videos with headphones. By 9:30, Sophie allowed herself to believe they might make it through the day without incident. Then the impossible happened. Sophie stepped away from her desk to deliver documents to the legal department, leaving strict instructions for Lily to stay put. When she returned 5 minutes later, Lily's chair was empty. Panic squeezed her chest as she scanned the small office. No Lily, no sparkles, just abandoned coloring books and a half-eaten granola bar. Lily, she called, trying to keep her voice calm as she checked under the desk. Melissa caught her eye from across the room and pointed toward Ethan's office, her expression a mix of amusement and concern. Sophie's heart dropped. The door to Ethan's office stood slightly ajar, and the sound of a small voice drifted through the opening. Sophie approached cautiously, peeking through the crack. Lily stood beside Ethan's desk, holding up a colorful drawing while chattering away. And this is the princess who lives in the castle. She has magic powers and can talk to animals. And this, she pointed emphatically, is the grumpy dragon who guards the treasure. Ethan sat rigid in his chair, hands folded on his desk, expression frozen somewhere between bewilderment and discomfort as he stared at the small intruder. The dragon looks mean, but he's actually nice once you get to know him, Lily continued earnestly. Just like you, Mr. Grumpy Dragon. Sophie gasped quietly, mortification washing over her in a hot wave. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Mr. Grumpy Dragon? That's what Mommy calls you sometimes, Lily explained with innocent honesty. But she says you're not really grumpy, just busy and important. Sophie pushed the door open, face burning. Lily Brooks! What are you doing in here? I told you to stay in your room. Lily looked up, unperturbed. I wanted to give Mr. Stone my picture. Look, Mommy, I made him a castle with a dragon that looks like him. Sophie couldn't meet Ethan's eyes. I am so sorry, she said, reaching for Lily's hand. She knows better than to interrupt. I wasn't interrupt? Lily struggled with the word. Interrupting, Ethan supplied, his voice surprisingly gentle. Right, I knocked first, Lily insisted, and Mr. Stone said, come in, so I did. Sophie finally risked a glance at Ethan, expecting irritation. Instead, she found him studying the colorful drawing with something like curiosity in his expression. The dragon does look rather distinguished, he commented, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. Lily beamed. He has gold scales and breathes blue fire instead of red. That makes him special. Something shifted in Ethan's face, a softening around the eyes, a relaxing of his perpetually stern expression. To Sophie's astonishment, he set the drawing aside and rose from his chair, crouching down to Lily's eye level. Thank you for the picture, Lily, he said, his deep voice gentled for her benefit. It's the first dragon drawing I've ever received. Lily tilted her head, studying him with disarming directness. Do you like it? I do, Ethan replied, and Sophie was stunned to realize he meant it. Especially the blue fire. Very creative. Blue is better than red, Lily said with absolute certainty. Red is boring. A genuine smile broke across Ethan's face. Not the polite version he used in meetings or the sardonic one Sophie occasionally glimpsed, but something warm and unguarded that transformed his features. Can't argue with that logic, he agreed, straightening up. His eyes met Sophie's over Lily's head, amusement dancing in their depths. Your daughter has quite the artistic talent. And quite the mouth, Sophie added, still mortified. Lily, we need to apologize for interrupting Mr. Stone's work. Sorry, Lily said without a hint of remorse. But you can keep the picture. I made it special with extra glitter. I'm honored, Ethan replied solemnly, though his eyes still held that unexpected warmth. Perhaps you could make another one while your mother and I have our meeting? Lily nodded enthusiastically. I'll make a princess next. She can have yellow hair like Mommy. Sophie's cheeks heated again as she ushered Lily toward the door. Back to your room now, Bug. Board members will be arriving soon. As they reached the doorway, Lily turned back. Bye, Mr. Grew. Sophie's gentle squeeze of her hand made her correct herself. Mr. Stone, thank you for liking my dragon. After settling Lily back in the small office with firm instructions to stay put, Sophie returned to Ethan's office, prepared to offer a more thorough apology. She found him standing by the window, the colorful drawing still on his desk. I'm truly sorry about that, she began. I've never brought her to work before, and she's not usually so forward with strangers. Ethan turned, surprising her with the relaxed set of his shoulders. No harm done. She's refreshingly honest. That's one way to put it, Sophie said, relief mingling with lingering embarrassment. I hope the, nickname didn't offend you. Children repeat things without context. A hint of that genuine smile returned. Mr. Grumpy Dragon? He shook his head. I've been called worse, though I'm curious what prompted it. Sophie winced. It may have slipped out after a particularly challenging day when you rejected the Henderson proposal 3 times. Fair assessment, Ethan acknowledged, leaning against his desk with an ease she rarely saw in him. Though I prefer distinguished dragon with blue fire to grumpy. The teasing note in his voice caught Sophie off guard, warming her from within. I'll update her vocabulary, she promised, and thank you for being so understanding about today's situation. She's a good kid, Ethan said simply. You should be proud. The sincere compliment touched Sophie more deeply than expected. I am. Every day. Their eyes held for a moment too long, something unspoken passing between them. The intercom buzzed, breaking the spell. "Mr. Stone, the board members are arriving," Melissa announced. Ethan straightened, professional demeanor sliding back into place. "We'd better get to the conference room." As Sophie turned to leave, she noticed him carefully place Lily's drawing in his desk drawer, rather than the trash bin. The small gesture sent an unexpected warmth blooming through her chest. The board meeting proceeded without incident. Lily perfectly behaved in her temporary office. When the last board member departed shortly after noon, Sophie found Ethan standing in the doorway of the small room, watching Lily create another masterpiece. "Is that the princess?" he asked, his voice gentler than Sophie had ever heard it. Lily looked up, face brightening. "Yes! She has yellow hair like Mommy and a sparkly dress. Do you want this one too?" "I would be honored," Ethan replied, and Sophie couldn't detect an ounce of insincerity in his tone. "I'm making a whole castle of people," Lily explained, selecting a purple crayon. "The princess needs friends." "Very wise," Ethan agreed, his gaze flickering to Sophie with unexpected warmth. As Lily returned to her artwork, Ethan turned to Sophie. "The Johnson call isn't until 3. Why don't you take her for lunch? There's a cafe on the ground floor with decent sandwiches." The thoughtfulness of the suggestion surprised her. "That would be nice. Thank you." "Take your time," he added, straightening his already perfect tie. "The meeting went well. We earned a break." As he walked away, Lily looked up from her drawing. "I like Mr. Stone. He's not really a grumpy dragon." Sophie smiled, watching Ethan's retreating figure. "No, Bug. I don't think he is." Later that afternoon, with Lily contentedly napping on the small office sofa after a morning of excitement, Sophie found Ethan standing by the windows, gazing out at the city below. "Peaceful?" she asked, joining him. "Surprisingly so," he admitted. "I expected chaos with a child in the office. She's remarkably well behaved." "Don't let her fool you. She can be a hurricane when she wants to be." Sophie smiled fondly. "Thank you again for today. I know it wasn't ideal." Ethan turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "My office is usually sterile, clinical. Today it felt different." "Invaded by glitter and unicorns?" Sophie suggested with a light laugh. "Alive," Ethan corrected, his voice quiet. "Sometimes I forget there's more to life than contracts and board meetings." The simple admission, offered without pretense, touched something deep in Sophie's heart. For a brief moment, she glimpsed the man beneath the CEO, someone capable of kneeling to admire a child's drawing, of appreciating blue dragonfire over red, of recognizing the absence of warmth in his perfectly ordered world. "Well, Lily has enough life in her for an entire office building," Sophie said, her voice softer than intended. "She tends to leave people a little changed after she hurricanes through." Ethan's eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable in the afternoon light. "I can see that." Something shifted between them in that moment. Something fundamental and irreversible. No longer just boss and assistant, no longer just two adults with chemistry they tried to ignore. For the first time, Sophie could see the outline of something more, something that included Lily in its glow. As if summoned by their thoughts, a sleepy voice called from the small office. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." "Duty calls," Sophie said with a smile, turning away. "Sophie?" Ethan's voice stopped her. When she looked back, his expression held a warmth she was beginning to treasure. "Bring her again sometime, if you need to." The invitation, so unexpected yet so sincerely offered, wrapped around Sophie's heart like a gentle promise. She'd like that. Apparently, she has a whole castle of people to introduce you to. As Sophie went to tend to her daughter, she couldn't help but wonder if those imaginary castle people might somehow be a vision of possibilities. A princess with yellow hair, a not-so-grumpy dragon, and a little girl bringing them together, one colorful drawing at a time. Glimpses of gentleness. Sophie stared at the email from HR, reading it for the third time to ensure she hadn't misunderstood. The message outlined a revised work arrangement, flexible hours, 2 work-from-home days per week, and a 15% raise to reflect expanded responsibilities. She glanced through the glass partition toward Ethan's office. He sat at his desk, brow furrowed in concentration as he reviewed documents, unaware of her scrutiny. Had he arranged this? The timing seemed too perfect to be coincidence, coming just days after Lily's unexpected office visit. "Did you know about this?" Sophie asked Melissa, tilting her screen toward the administrative assistant. Melissa's smile was knowing. HR doesn't typically create custom arrangements for temporary employees, if that answers your question. But he never said anything. Sophie kept her voice low, still watching Ethan through the glass. He wouldn't. Melissa gathered files from her desk. That's not his style. If you thank him, he'll probably just grunt and change the subject. Sophie considered this as she returned to her tasks. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd glimpsed layers to Ethan Stone that contradicted his stern public persona. The patient way he'd knelt to admire Lily's artwork, how he'd remembered Sophie took her coffee with 1 sugar, his genuine interest in her online coursework, small moments that revealed a gentler man beneath the composed exterior. By late afternoon, Sophie's curiosity won out. She knocked softly on Ethan's door during a break between his calls. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his computer. Sophie entered. The HR email pulled up on her tablet. "I received an interesting message today." Ethan glanced up, his expression revealing nothing. "Oh." "Flexible scheduling and a substantial raise." She set the tablet on his desk. "Apparently, I've taken on expanded responsibilities that warrant special accommodation." His eyes returned to his screen. "HR handles compensation adjustments. If you have questions about your contract, speak with them." "I did," Sophie replied calmly. "Nancy said the directive came from you." A flicker of annoyance crossed his features, likely at being caught in his generosity. "It's a standard business decision. The alternative was losing productive hours when you need to handle childcare emergencies." The clinical explanation might have convinced her weeks ago, but Sophie had learned to read between Ethan's carefully chosen lines. "It will make a tremendous difference for Lily and me," she said softly. "Thank you." Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Your work has been satisfactory. The company values efficiency." "Of course." Sophie suppressed a smile at his businesslike rationalization. "Efficiency is important." His eyes finally met hers, a hint of vulnerability flickering in their depths before being quickly masked. "Was there anything else?" "No." Sophie turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Except that Lily finished that castle of people she was telling you about. She insisted I bring it in for you." Something softened in Ethan's expression. "I'd like to see it." "I'll leave it on your desk tomorrow," Sophie promised, warmth blooming in her chest at his simple acceptance of her daughter's gift. As she returned to her work, Sophie found herself smiling. Ethan Stone might hide behind efficiency and business decisions, but his actions revealed what his words would not. Dark clouds had gathered by late afternoon, unleashing a deluge that pounded against the office windows. Sophie watched raindrops chase each other down the glass, checking her phone for weather alerts. The forecast predicted storms through the evening, a miserable night for bus commuting with Lily, who was spending the afternoon with Sophie's grandfather in his assisted living facility nearby. "Looks like it's getting worse," Melissa observed, gathering her belongings. "Better head out before the streets flood. Do you need a ride?" Sophie shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I'm meeting Lily at my grandfather's place, and it's in the opposite direction from your home." "You're sure?" Melissa frowned, eyeing the sheets of rain. "That's a long, wet walk to the bus stop." "We'll manage." Sophie smiled reassuringly. "It's not the first time we've been caught in rain." Melissa departed with a worried wave, leaving Sophie to finish organizing the week's calendar. Most staff had already left, the storm prompting an early exodus. Only the soft glow from Ethan's office indicated she wasn't entirely alone. At 6 o'clock, Sophie shut down her computer and shrugged into her light jacket, woefully inadequate for the weather, but the only protection she had. She knocked on Ethan's door to let him know she was leaving. "Come in," he called. Sophie opened the door, finding him still focused on his computer, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "I'm heading out to pick up Lily. Is there anything else you need before I go?" Ethan glanced up, his eyes tracking to the window where rain lashed against the glass. "You're taking the bus? In this?" "It stops 2 blocks from my grandfather's building," she said with a shrug. "Nothing a little rain can't handle." Ethan frowned, checking his watch. "That's not just a little rain. It's practically a monsoon." He stood, gathering his jacket and keys. "I'll drive you." "That's not necessary," Sophie protested. "It's out of your way." "It's also unnecessary for you and Lily to get pneumonia." His tone brooked no argument as he shut down his computer. "Where's your grandfather's place?" "Ridgeview Assisted Living on Maple Street," Sophie replied, knowing that determined set of his jaw well enough not to argue further. "But really, we're used to—" "Sophie!" Ethan met her eyes directly. "Let me do this." The simple request, delivered without pretense, quieted her objections. "Thank you." In the parking garage, Ethan guided her to his car, with a light hand at the small of her back, opening the passenger door before circling to the driver's side. The interior smelled of leather and his subtle cologne, the space intimate as rain drummed on the roof. "My grandfather will be thrilled to see your car," Sophie commented as they pulled onto the rain-slicked street. "He used to restore classic automobiles before his health declined." Ethan navigated through traffic with easy confidence. "What does he think of your career change?" "He's proud." Sophie smiled, thinking of her grandfather's excitement when she'd told him about the position. "Though he says the coffee shop feels empty without me." "You miss it," Ethan observed, surprising her with his perception. Sophie considered this. "Parts of it, the regulars, the rhythm of the morning rush, knowing exactly what I was doing every day." She turned to watch raindrops streak across her window. "But I don't miss the constant worry about making ends meet." Comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated by the hypnotic swish of windshield wipers and distant rumbles of thunder. The city transformed around them, buildings blurred by rain, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered stars. "How is your coursework going?" Ethan asked as they waited at a traffic light. The question warmed her. He'd remembered. "Slowly but steadily. I'm taking financial analysis this semester. It's challenging, especially after a full day's work, but fascinating." "Financial analysis was my favorite course in business school," Ethan admitted, a hint of animation entering his voice. "Stripping away the noise to reveal patterns and opportunities." "Exactly." Sophie turned toward him, surprised by their shared interest. "My professor says I have an intuitive grasp of market fluctuations." "I've noticed." At her questioning look, he elaborated. "Your observations on the Wellington proposal. You see connections others miss." The compliment, delivered matter-of-factly, meant more coming from someone of his expertise. "Thank you," she said softly. They arrived at Ridgeview through sheets of rain. Ethan pulled beneath the covered entrance. "I'll wait here while you get Lily." "You're sure? It might be a few minutes. My grandfather likes to talk." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "I have nowhere pressing to be." Inside, Sophie found Lily and her grandfather engaged in an intense game of Go Fish at his small dining table. Lily squealed when she saw her mother, leaping up for a hug. "Mommy! I beat Grandpa 3 times! And we had pudding cups!" "Sounds like a perfect afternoon." Sophie embraced her father's father, noting the new lines around his eyes. His health had stabilized since moving to assisted living, but age was taking its inevitable toll. "How are you feeling, Grandpa?" Dark clouds had gathered by late afternoon, unleashing a deluge that pounded against the office windows. Sophie watched raindrops chase each other down the glass, checking her phone for weather alerts. The forecast predicted storms through the evening, a miserable night for bus commuting with Lily, who was spending the afternoon with Sophie's grandfather in his assisted living facility nearby. "Looks like it's getting worse," Melissa observed, gathering her belongings. "Better head out before the streets flood. Do you need a ride?" Sophie shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I'm meeting Lily at my grandfather's place, and it's in the opposite direction from your home." "You're sure?" Melissa frowned, eyeing the sheets of rain. "That's a long, wet walk to the bus stop." "We'll manage." Sophie smiled reassuringly. "It's not the first time we've been caught in rain." Melissa departed with a worried wave, leaving Sophie to finish organizing the week's calendar. Most staff had already left, the storm prompting an early exodus. Only the soft glow from Ethan's office indicated she wasn't entirely alone. At 6 o'clock, Sophie shut down her computer and shrugged into her light jacket, woefully inadequate for the weather, but the only protection she had. She knocked on Ethan's door to let him know she was leaving. "Come in," he called. Sophie opened the door, finding him still focused on his computer, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "I'm heading out to pick up Lily. Is there anything else you need before I go?" Ethan glanced up, his eyes tracking to the window where rain lashed against the glass. "You're taking the bus? In this?" "It stops 2 blocks from my grandfather's building," she said with a shrug. "Nothing a little rain can't handle." Ethan frowned, checking his watch. "That's not just a little rain. It's practically a monsoon." He stood, gathering his jacket and keys. "I'll drive you." "That's not necessary," Sophie protested. "It's out of your way." "It's also unnecessary for you and Lily to get pneumonia." His tone brooked no argument as he shut down his computer. "Where's your grandfather's place?" "Ridgeview Assisted Living on Maple Street," Sophie replied, knowing that determined set of his jaw well enough not to argue further. "But really, we're used to—" "Sophie!" Ethan met her eyes directly. "Let me do this." The simple request, delivered without pretense, quieted her objections. "Thank you." In the parking garage, Ethan guided her to his car, with a light hand at the small of her back, opening the passenger door before circling to the driver's side. The interior smelled of leather and his subtle cologne, the space intimate as rain drummed on the roof. "My grandfather will be thrilled to see your car," Sophie commented as they pulled onto the rain-slicked street. "He used to restore classic automobiles before his health declined." Ethan navigated through traffic with easy confidence. "What does he think of your career change?" "He's proud." Sophie smiled, thinking of her grandfather's excitement when she'd told him about the position. "Though he says the coffee shop feels empty without me." "You miss it," Ethan observed, surprising her with his perception. Sophie considered this. "Parts of it, the regulars, the rhythm of the morning rush, knowing exactly what I was doing every day." She turned to watch raindrops streak across her window. "But I don't miss the constant worry about making ends meet." Comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated by the hypnotic swish of windshield wipers and distant rumbles of thunder. The city transformed around them, buildings blurred by rain, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered stars. "How is your coursework going?" Ethan asked as they waited at a traffic light. The question warmed her. He'd remembered. "Slowly but steadily. I'm taking financial analysis this semester. It's challenging, especially after a full day's work, but fascinating." "Financial analysis was my favorite course in business school," Ethan admitted, a hint of animation entering his voice. "Stripping away the noise to reveal patterns and opportunities." "Exactly." Sophie turned toward him, surprised by their shared interest. "My professor says I have an intuitive grasp of market fluctuations." "I've noticed." At her questioning look, he elaborated. "Your observations on the Wellington proposal. You see connections others miss." The compliment, delivered matter-of-factly, meant more coming from someone of his expertise. "Thank you," she said softly. They arrived at Ridgeview through sheets of rain. Ethan pulled beneath the covered entrance. "I'll wait here while you get Lily." "You're sure? It might be a few minutes. My grandfather likes to talk." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "I have nowhere pressing to be." Inside, Sophie found Lily and her grandfather engaged in an intense game of Go Fish at his small dining table. Lily squealed when she saw her mother, leaping up for a hug. "Mommy! I beat Grandpa 3 times! And we had pudding cups!" "Sounds like a perfect afternoon." Sophie embraced her father's father, noting the new lines around his eyes. His health had stabilized since moving to assisted living, but age was taking its inevitable toll. "How are you feeling, Grandpa?" "Right as rain," he replied with characteristic optimism, glancing toward the window. "Though perhaps that's not the best metaphor today. Actually, I have a surprise. A colleague gave us a ride, and he's waiting to take us home." Her grandfather's eyebrows rose. "A colleague with a car on a night like this? Must be a special colleague." Sophie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's Mr. Stone, my boss." Understanding dawned in her grandfather's eyes. "Ah, the famous Mr. Stone. Lily's told me all about the not grumpy dragon." "Grandpa," Sophie warned, but he merely chuckled. After gathering Lily's backpack and promising to visit again soon, Sophie hurried her daughter through the lobby. Despite her umbrella, they were both damp by the time they reached Ethan's car. "Look, Lily, Mr. Stone is giving us a ride home," Sophie explained, as Ethan emerged to help them. Lily's face lit up with recognition. "Mr. Stone, did you like my Castle People drawing?" "Very much," Ethan replied, his usually stern expression softening as he held the door for them. "Especially the wizard with the purple hat." Lily beamed as she climbed into the back seat. "I knew you'd like him. He does magic spells to make grumpy dragons happy." Sophie shot Ethan an apologetic glance as she helped Lily with her seatbelt, but he seemed more amused than annoyed by the child's candor. The drive to Sophie's apartment was filled with Lily's cheerful chatter about her day with Grandpa, the rainstorm, and elaborate plans for her next masterpiece. Sophie watched Ethan's reactions in the rearview mirror, surprised by his patient responses to Lily's endless questions about his car, his office, and why grown-ups wore neck ropes, ties. Gradually, Lily's voice grew sleepy, her excitement waning as the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers and gentle rumble of the engine lulled her. Within minutes, she was asleep, head tilted against the window, sparkles clutched to her chest. "And silence falls," Sophie whispered with fond amusement. "The Lily storm passes." Ethan's eyes met hers briefly in the rearview mirror, warmth dancing in their depths. "She's something special." "She is," Sophie agreed softly, "though I'm afraid she's abandoned all pretense of calling you anything but Mr. Stone now." "I've been called worse," he reminded her, the corner of his mouth quirking upward. They drove in comfortable silence, city lights painting shifting patterns across the dashboard as rain continued its gentle percussion on the roof. In this enclosed space, with Lily sleeping peacefully behind them, Sophie felt an unexpected intimacy, a shared moment outside the confines of their professional relationship. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured, voice hushed to avoid waking Lily. Ethan nodded, eyes on the rain-slicked road. "Do you have family here in the city?" The question had lingered since their late-night conversation over takeout containers. His hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "My sister lives across the country with her husband and children. My father is semi-retired, but still keeps an office at headquarters." "And your mother?" "She passed when I was in college." His voice remained even, but Sophie caught the subtle tension in his jaw. "Heart condition." "I'm sorry," she said simply, recognizing the old grief beneath his controlled expression. Ethan nodded acknowledgement. After a moment's pause, he added, "Family dinners are quarterly affairs scheduled with the same precision as board meetings." The admission revealed more than his words alone, the structured loneliness of his life, the absence of casual warmth that Sophie took for granted with Lily and her grandfather. "Who takes care of you, Ethan?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider its intimacy. His eyes flickered to hers, surprise evident in their depths. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but devoid of defensiveness. "I've been taking care of myself for a long time." The simple statement, neither bitter nor self-pitying, tugged at Sophie's heart. She thought of her own life, challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but rich with Lily's laughter, her grandfather's wisdom, even the community of regulars from the coffee shop who still texted to check on her. "Everyone needs someone," she said softly. Ethan didn't respond, but something shifted in his expression, a subtle vulnerability that he didn't immediately mask. They turned onto Sophie's street, the moment suspended between them like the raindrops glistening on the windows. As he pulled up to her building, the downpour had gentled to a steady shower. Ethan insisted on walking them to the door, holding an umbrella over Sophie while she carried the still sleeping Lily. "Thank you," Sophie said when they reached her apartment entrance, meaning far more than just the ride. "For everything." Ethan's eyes held hers in the dim hallway light, something unspoken passing between them. "You're welcome," he replied simply. As he turned to leave, Sophie called softly after him. "Ethan!" He paused, looking back. "Maybe someday you could join us for dinner. Nothing quarterly or precisely scheduled. Just dinner." For a heartbeat, he seemed genuinely startled by the invitation. Then his expression warmed in a way that transformed his features. "I'd like that." Sophie watched him walk away, Lily's weight warm against her shoulder, rain pattering gently outside. Something had shifted tonight, a door opening between them that had previously remained firmly closed. As she carried her sleeping daughter inside, Sophie realized with soft certainty that Ethan Stone had revealed more in his quiet actions than words could ever express, and that she was falling for the man behind the grumpy dragon facade, one glimpse of gentleness at a time.